I have always needed almonds. Find me in the mountains of Tibet, the plains of Mongolia, the ranch lands of Argentina, and I will be in an almond grove, beneath the petaled trees with a chunk of onyx, smashing the outer shells and coaxing out the cinnamon-colored flesh. The story of this need begins in Andalusia, before my birth. In this canyon I now stand above, home of Canyonman, who turned the soil in which my father once grew. We lived in a fine house down the road. My father pressed olives, and through smart dealings and hard work, owned groves for miles around. His press was crafted by Mauricio Termini, known throughout the Mediterranean as the finest maker of olive presses. My mother and father married early, and she was soon pregnant. She could pinpoint the evening it happened in early June before dinner, because that same night she began to dream of almendros. And not of any almendros, of the almendros of the Canyonman. The Canyonman lived in a steep valley separating our plateau of land from the hills rising up toward town. The only road leading in was blocked by what we believed were corpses of children. And if any boy or girl in the pueblo refused to eat vegetables or come in for supper, they would be threatened with the spells of the Canyonman. He was the terror in the closet, the boogie monster, the Sandman of our youths. He was also a stunning gardener. Anyone taking a moment to peer down into his canyon could tell as much. And his almendros were known far and wide as sweet enough to buckle your knees. 6 months into my mother's pregnancy, her dreams of the Canyonman's almendros had grown into a heavy desire. My father, having known of the Canyonman from his youth and having witnessed his spells, could not fulfill my mother's wishes to fetch almonds from the valley, not that he refused to try. He spoke with the old almond growers to discover where the finest almonds grew.
Y pelaba las almendras, lo que la cáscara de afuera, ojo, lo de partirla no. Si alguna partiera para mí, para comérmela yo. Para comerla yo, ¿no?
He went deep in the Sierra de Fibreretas, into the terrace groves surrounding the town of Lubrin, to pick the sweetest almonds known to man. But not, my mother insisted, as sweet as the almonds that came from the almendros of the Canyonman. It was on a cool night in January, after a week of rain, and after a week of being inside the cortijo listening to my mother howl for almonds, that my father went into the canyon, and he did not come back. My mother took on all the guilt for the disappearance of my father. It was her diabolical urges for almonds or the creatures inside her that led her husband into the canyon. And sometimes, even now as I travel, my eyes peel back for the flicker of white petals of those twisted black bark trees. I still hear her screaming at me as I float in her stomach. Perhaps it was my father failing to return, perhaps it was the desperate need for the Canyonman's almonds. But the following morning, 6 months pregnant, my mother put a blanket over her shoulders and descended into the canyon. And there, sitting among his chickens, was the Canyonman. As she recounted to me, without a word, he took her into the almond grove, examined the tree, and broke open an almond. And as she stood chewing, all her million desires satiated at once, Canyonman told her that it was her husband, the father of the child in her stomach, that she was now eating. She vomited. Canyonman waited patiently, handing her a wet cloth to clean her lips. He went on to explain that the night before his dogs had set upon a man harvesting almonds from his grove. As they tore his pants, the man pleaded for his life. So, said the Canyonman, he let the man live. As an almendro. Now, said Canyonman, you may eat your fill from my grove of almonds. But what about my husband? Asked my mother. He will die when the winds blowing down from the Sierra Nevada pull the last of his petals from his branches. And how will he live? Asked my mother. He will live if you are able to make him speak. And how will I make a tree speak? The Canyonman shrugged. That is your concern. And he left her. She stood beneath the tree, letting the petals brush her forehead. She tasted a petal and swore it tasted of her husband's skin. And then, in a fit of anger and desperation, she seized the branch and yanked. It broke off with a terrible moan, a moan she recognized as her lover's. And that night she returned home with the branch in her hands and slept beside it. My mother tried everything to make my father speak. One evening, in the last light, she coaxed a beautiful girl from town to wear a skirt and dance beside his branches. Although the girl danced enchantingly, no voice was heard. She found a lonely man on the streets playing the violin. She begged him to play music to break the Canyonman's spell. He obliged, but no music was magical enough to make my father utter a word. She tried herself to make him speak, singing his favorite songs, then singing her favorite songs, pleading with him to make the smallest sound.
Darkness every day. Ain't no sunshine when he's gone, and this house just ain't no home. Anytime he goes away, wonder this time where he's gone.
Finally, she broke down in tears. Sometimes she thought he moved, but she knew that it was the wind's gathering strength. His petals were already starting to fall. The Canyonman, watching from below, looked north toward the Sierra Nevadas. My mother, afraid she would never see my father again, had his image painted, and soon our house was filled with canvases of almond trees. Beautiful, painted in the final throes of day, the undersides of the branches illuminated by the low sun. My mother, at a loss, visited Las Cuevas, where she came from. Over 100 gypsies had dug caves into the earth.
Mama. Mamá. 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 Dime qué hago. Mi marido. He perdido a mi marido. Dime qué hago, mamá. ¿Dónde está? Mamá. Mamá.
My grandmother, unsurprised by what had befallen my father, cursed and sent for the bruja.
A mayores sea pequeño, quiere dar un consejo. Tan en medio de la gente del mismo abierto, cabras estrellas. Veía los planetas, suplica a todos los gobernantes, se arrodilla, que gasten menos en armamento.
We must sing in Spanish to him, said the bruja. We must make him cry. My mother's brother, who hated my father, heard about what had happened. And late at night he stole into the canyon and shook the branches of the tree, eager to hasten my father's death. Satisfied there were no petals left, he stole away. And the next morning my mother discovered just 2 petals hidden in the crook of a limb, left on my father's branches. She tore at her hair.
Volvemos. Cogemos nuestras manos derechas.
These are not the winds of the norte, said the bruja. Your brother shook your husband's petals loose, and the Canyonman has caught him. Your brother will never be seen again. My mother began to cry anew. We must not waste time weeping, said the bruja, taking my mother by the shoulders. The ants are coming out of the earth, the heavy winds are not far behind. These 2 petals will not last long, we must sing to him now. So that same night, the sound of oranges thudding on the ground as the wind shook them loose. They approached the tree that was her husband. 1 lone petal remained in its branches, and the bruja began to sing.
Miramos la flor del árbol, que hermosa no la dio Dios, y el humano la cortamos, y el humano la cortamos.
Nothing happened at first, and then the branches began to shake, the bark began to quiver, and suddenly, cutting through the wind that blew around them, the tree broke out into a scream that sounded, my mother told me, like 1,000 dying birds. There was a flash of lightning, and there, crouched before her, his pants torn, covered in the dirt of the canyon, was my father. They hurried out of the valley and moved across the ocean to the United States, far from the almond groves of the Canyonman, where I was raised. As I grew into a man, I was told the story again and again, and although the terrorists kept me from these Almendros for 30 years of my life, my desire only continues to grow. And as Ugolino said in Dante's Inferno, when asked if he ate his children, hunger soon overcame sadness.
Pedimos ayuda al Creador y a todos los días del espacio para que nos ayude a que se acabe la envidia en el campo, la envidia en los pueblos, la envidia en el mundo, para que todos seamos mejores.